Welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to understand what is a context. What is a DAX? DAX is basically data analysis expressions. It is a formula expression language. Okay. In Power BI, we use DAX to create three things. One is calculated columns. Second is measures. And the third is calculated tables. Okay. Before you begin to write the DAX formula, you need to understand about what is a context. You have two calculation engines. So context will be having a demo in a moment so that we can deep dive and understand what exactly is the context. And then we have something called as two calculation engines within Power BI. So depending on what formula you write, the related engine gets activated. One is aggregation engine and the second is iteration engine. So basically it's nothing but the categorization of the functions. There are some set of functions which work certain way. So basically, whatever function you use, the related engine gets activated. Just for understanding, okay? So nothing will show up in the front, but this is all done in the backend. And then we have something called as calculation engine on which DAX formulas work. So the same thing which we spoke about, these two engines, right? Aggregation engine and iteration engine. The calculation engine, whatever the one of those two engines work only after the filters that are properly applied in the data model. So what is this point trying to say is, whatever engine is acting upon, it will act only after the actual data model, works, right? First, the data model will be in place, like whatever data model you have created, the flow of direction of the filter, if you remember, right? From one table to the other fact table, the one table to the other table. So depending upon the flow of direction of the filter, only after that the engine works. So first thing is that how the filter should be propagated in the data model, and then comes the calculation engine. The most popularly used DAX function is calculate, and you need to master this one function to excel your journey on DAX. So let us move back to our Power BI list of 5. So we have created our first measure in the previous session, right? The total sales, and I have saved this file as DAX decoded demo. Before I even begin, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure my background feels good so that, I can continue with my explanation of the context. So let me just click on this empty canvas area, go back to this canvas background on the formatting section, browse for the image. Actually, we download an image from the PowerPoint. I'll just select that image and make sure your transparency is set to 0%. So usually this will be 100%. If it is 0%, then you can see the image. All right. So let us continue with our explanation on the context. So context, before we understand context, what we have to do is we'll just try to map some data over here. So I'll be adding a plain table. Okay. I'll be adding some table here. And then I wanted to add a date. So when I add date, I wanted to change the date format to regular date, TD, month and year. And then I wanted to add this calculated measure, whatever measure we have created, just drag and drop. Okay. Now I wanted to copy paste this and convert this into line chart. I'm going to create some more visuals. So here maybe I wanted to use channel instead of date, right? Okay. Wanted to make sure just aligning a bit. And then I wanted to add some slicer on the left side. Maybe I wanted to first go with the date slicer, right? Date slicer. Then I wanted to add something here below. product name. So this is just for the demonstration. So we are using a slicer, which is acts like a filter. These are like filters. Don't worry about all this visualization. We'll be covering all of them in our visualization session. So right now we're just trying to explain some concepts. So for that, I'm just pulling up some visuals. Maybe I wanted to convert this into I wanted to add a customer name here. Okay. So now I think we are ready to go with our explanation. So we have, good details of explanation that I can do using this data. Maybe I could also wanted to add some more thing here, which is scorecard. All right. I'm going to just reduce the text size. Fine. So right now what I've done is I've pulled in some visualizations, like this is table visual, this is pie visuals, line chart, pie chart, scorecard, all these are slices, just to understand what is the context. Okay. So in all these four visuals, right, I have used a measure that we have created called total sales, right? This is the total sales measure that we have created. Okay. This is the total sales measure that we have created. And one thing you have to notice is the total sales value here, the total sales value here, and the total sales value here, and the total sales. So it is a bit different, right? So if you look at this specific value, let's talk about some 13th January 2021. It's something close to 49,787, right? 49K. So it's almost 49,000. So again, that value is differing from whatever value if you look at here for the distributor, right? And again, that value changes when you change the date slicer. Let's say I'm changing the filter. So let us keep the initial part so that we have the starting. Okay. I'm just trying to change the date and also maybe I'm trying to change the products. Let's say I wanted to select some products. Okay, I just selected a few products. And if you look at this 13th January value, it has changed to 36,000, right? And if I change furthermore customer names, I wanted to make sure the 13th January, I think the customers that I've selected, there is no sale on 13th Jan for that particular customer. I'm trying to make sure there is multiple selections. Okay, yeah. So I've selected quite a few customer names and a few product names, and I've changed the date range, right? And if you look at the 13th January value, it's changing based upon the selection that you are doing, right? And also you can see the total sales value is also changing. So the thing that I am trying to explain here is whatever we do, whatever selection we do here, accordingly the value of the measure or the total sales gets changed. So it depend. What I'm trying to say is that is nothing but based upon the context. Okay. So based upon the context, the value keeps changing. Okay. So here you need to understand here these, like, the value changes based upon the context. Here the value was changing based upon the product context, based upon the date context, based upon the customer names context. That means whatever filter you are applying, the relevant sales value is changing. Okay, even if you look at the line chart, it's changing, right? So your measure value is dependent upon the context set upon the desktop, Power BI desktop, or the scenario based upon this canvas, right? And also if you can look at this total sales, this is again 4 million, and this is giving you the total value. This value you are able to see here, because there is no context set for any other product or any other customer name, like individual date. Of course, customer name and product name is set, sorry, but yeah, there's no individual date. So if you look at this, total value is same as this value. Okay, just try to explain in this. If we look at this value and this value are both one and the same, right? Because there is no individual dates filter setup for this, so this value and this value is same. But however, here there's an extra level of context set along with the initial context like date, product, customer name. We have individual date context set for individual row. If you talk about 13th January, here we have a 13th January context set, right? Context like a filter set. Okay, context is nothing but kind of a filter or kind of a scenario set, right? So again, if you talk about these overall values, right? If you sum these overall values, this will go to the 4 million again. But when you look at the individual slices, this is based upon the individual wholesale, distributor, and export, right? So the thing that you need to understand or take away from this topic here is the context. So wherever you see the DAX formula, it has to behave based upon the context set. So especially if you look at the table, it has multiple contexts. For example, you have row context, which is, if you talk about this particular record, here the 6,000 is coming based upon the row context set on the 4th January. Okay. Again, if you talk about this one, this 22,000 is coming based upon the 15th January. So there's a row context, which is the initial context, the very first context set, and then the slices that you are selecting here, product name or customer name. Okay. So that is what you need to understand. So this is not by default set in the canvas, right? You're not. So the DAX formula is calculating based upon this context. And again, one more thing that you need to remember is all this context is happening only after the very first thing that is happening, right? Let me just clear this thing. So whatever you see here is happening only after the initial part, which is happening on the data model, right? So that means, let's say you are filtering a specific product name, right? So when you filter a specific product name, what is happening? It is filtering based upon that product ID. Right? If you look at this join, when you select a specific product name here, let's say I've selected so-and-so products, right? Product 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever. So when I've done that, automatically those product IDs are selected and it is going to the main series table. And it is then filtering those product IDs. And further, it is breaking down the data based upon those product IDs. Let's say those so-and-so product IDs, whatever has been selected. Let's say roughly I've selected this. Based upon that selection, your data is getting filtered to lesser, it's basically the revised data you're getting, the revised table. So it's not the original big table, but based upon the product selections, the data is getting lesser. Like here you can see I've selected 4 product IDs. Based upon the data, the table size is small. And upon this smaller table size, your the DAX formula that you have written in this total sales, this one, right? Total sales, sum of total revenue. So that sum of total revenue is being applied on this reduced sized table. Okay. So based upon your slicer that you have applied, not only product ID, but also the customer ID, right? You also have some customer ID selected over there. So based upon the customer IDs, your data size gets very narrow. You can see this is a very smaller data set. Now what happens on this data set, the DAX formula gets applied. The sum of total revenue gets applied and the calculation goes up here. Okay. And again, in this table, again, you have a date-wise breakup of this total sales, right? For January 1st, what is that? If you closely look at this data again, so even though you have these many filters, but again, it goes back to your order date. Let's say based upon the order date, let's say you have something called as 18 January. So on 18 January, this is the value. So this value is shown up here. So based upon the selection that. So basically the sum of this DAX formula happens on the reduced data set of your selections on the product name and customer name. So on the back end, what happens? Those IDs get filtered to your main table, which is a fact table, and the table gets reduced to very smaller size. And on top of that smaller size table, you will be seeing the DAX formula get summed up. Okay. So this is the context, concept that you need to understand.